I never thought Easter Sunday would be the day my whole world cracked open. Most families spend the holiday laughing, sharing food, and taking pictures in bright spring colors. But that morning, as I stood outside the restaurant in my simple dress, cold wind hitting my face, I realized my family was nothing like the warm, happy ones on TV. And the moment my dad stepped out of the car with his mistress, smiling like he hadn't just blown up 20 years of marriage, the day took a turn I still can't forget. My mother squeezed my hand and I could feel her trying to stay strong. She had dressed carefully for this brunch, soft pastel colors, neat hair, a calm smile she practiced in the mirror. It was supposed to be a peaceful Easter brunch, something my dad invited us to so we could all move forward. But nothing about this day felt peaceful, and nothing about his tone had felt hopeful. Still, Mom agreed because she believed closure was better than confusion, and she wanted me to understand that even painful endings could be handled with grace. My dad stepped toward us, but he wasn't alone. His mistress, a woman I had only seen in photos online, walked beside him like she belonged there. She wore a bright dress, bold heels, and makeup so perfect it almost looked like she walked out of a fashion ad. She smiled at me like we were supposed to be friends, like she hadn't been the reason my home stopped feeling like a home. I didn't know whether to look away or stare. I chose to stare. Mom stayed still. I don't know how she kept her face calm. Maybe she wasn't calm, maybe she was just tired of breaking. Dad leaned in for a polite hug, but Mom stepped back. He pretended not to notice. "Glad you both made it," he said like he was hosting something cheerful. "They already have the table ready for us." The restaurant behind him was beautiful. Big windows, soft music, the smell of warm bread drifting into the breeze. It should have been a place for family. It should have been a place we felt welcome. But the moment we walked inside, I sensed something was wrong. The hostess looked confused when Dad gave the reservation name. She pointed toward a long table set for only 3 people. 3 seats. Not 4. My father shifted uncomfortably. His mistress pretended to look at the decorations, like she wasn't part of the problem. "There must be a mistake," Mom said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry, it was just disappointed, like she already knew the answer. Dad cleared his throat. "Actually, I thought maybe it would just be us 3 today. Easier to talk." "Us 3, Mom repeated, staring at him. "As in you, her, and our daughter. Without me." He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. He didn't even pretend. The hostess looked between us, unsure whether to step in or stay quiet. The restaurant buzzed with soft conversation, glasses clinking, families laughing politely. But our moment felt like it existed in a different world, sharp, cold, and painfully loud even in silence. My mom looked at him with the kind of hurt that doesn't come from a single moment, but from years of being taken for granted. She inhaled slowly as if steadying herself. "You invited me," she whispered. "You said it would be good to talk." Dad exhaled like the situation was inconvenient. "I didn't think you'd take it this personally. It's Easter. I wanted a peaceful brunch." "Peaceful." He said peaceful while standing next to the woman he cheated with. The woman he chose instead of his own family. And now he wanted us to step aside like we were nothing but old chapters he didn't want to read anymore. Mom didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a scene. She simply asked, "Do you want us to leave?" Dad didn't answer with words. His silence was loud enough. His mistress placed a gentle hand on his arm, looking at us with sympathy she probably thought made her look kind. "Maybe it's better if we handle this privately," she said softly. "We don't want any unnecessary tension." Unnecessary tension. That was her version of what we'd lived through. Mom nodded, almost too quickly, as if clarity had just hit her like a cold wave. "You're right," she said. "There's no reason for us to stay where we aren't welcome." She turned to leave, and I followed her without even looking back at the table set for 3. But before we reached the door, the restaurant manager stopped us. Not to comfort us, not to ask what was wrong, but because Dad had walked up behind us and said the words that made the whole room freeze. "They're not on my reservation. They're not supposed to be here." Just like that. Like we were strangers. Like he didn't share a home, a marriage, and a child with the woman standing in front of him. A couple at a nearby table stared. Another family went quiet. Even the manager hesitated. Mom's eyes filled, not with tears but with something sharper. Something that looked a lot like resolve. She took a deep breath and reached into her purse. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. When she spoke, she sounded like a woman who finally remembered her worth. "You know," she said calmly, "I wasn't planning on discussing this today. I wanted our daughter to have a peaceful Easter. But maybe this is the right moment." Dad frowned. "For what?" Mom pulled out a folded stack of papers, neatly clipped together. The prenup, she said. The one you signed before we got married. The one you think I forgot about. He blinked, confused. His mistress blinked too. People around us pretended not to look, but their ears were wide open. Mom continued, you might want to read section 5 again. Especially the part about infidelity. And the part about public humiliation. Dad opened his mouth but nothing came out. Mom stepped closer, not aggressive, not bitter, just heartbreakingly sure of herself. You kicked your own family out of Easter brunch. You embarrassed me in public. And you brought her here like I don't exist. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But trust me, you're going to wish you handled this day differently. And then she walked past him, the prenup held tightly in her hand, leaving him standing there speechless. Outside, as the restaurant doors closed behind us, I finally asked, Mom, what does that prenup actually say? She looked at me with a small, tired smile. Enough, she whispered. More than enough. But I could tell there was something she hadn't told me yet, something big enough to shake everything my father thought he had. Something that would turn this whole situation upside down. Something he clearly didn't see coming. And as we walked away from the restaurant, leaving the drama behind us for the moment, I realized Easter Sunday wasn't the end of our story. The walk back to the car felt longer than it should have. Maybe it was because the weight of everything, Dad, the brunch, the prenup, the public humiliation, was pressing down on us like heavy air. My mom kept her eyes forward, one hand wrapped tightly around her purse, the other brushing her hair back whenever the wind blew it across her face. I watched her closely. She looked calm, but I knew her calmness was just a protective layer she had learned to wear over pain. Once we got inside the car, she didn't start it right away. She sat still for a few seconds, breathing slowly, trying to gather herself. I could tell she was replaying the moment. Dad dismissing us, the mistress acting polite, the people in the restaurant staring. Maybe she was wondering how her life had ended up here. Maybe she was wondering how love could turn into something so cold. Mom, I finally said, what did you mean back there? About the prenup, what's in it? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared through the windshield like she was seeing a memory instead of the parking lot. After a long pause, she finally whispered, your father always thought he had more control than he actually had. That sentence alone carried more weight than she intended. She pulled out the papers again, neatly folded, unwrinkled, like she had guarded them for years. She placed them on her lap but didn't open them. I didn't bring these today to use them, she said softly. I brought them because I felt like something was coming. And I didn't want to be caught off guard. I nodded slowly. So, what does it say? What does it mean for us? Mom rested her hand on the papers. It means your father shouldn't have pushed the limits the way he has. She looked at me, her eyes tired but strong. Especially not today. The way she said it gave me chills. There was something deeper, something she wasn't telling me yet. Something more serious than just dividing assets or deciding who gets what. It felt bigger than that, bigger than the betrayal itself. But she wasn't ready to reveal it. And I didn't push her. We drove home in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I kept replaying the moment Dad said, they're not supposed to be here. It kept echoing in my mind like a sentence spoken by a stranger, not a father. It didn't just hurt Mom. It hurt me too. Like he had decided some new chapter in his life didn't have space for us anymore. The house felt unusually quiet when we got home. Maybe because the weight of everything echoed through the rooms. The framed family photos on the wall looked out of place, like they belonged to another timeline where we were still a complete family, where Dad still cared. Mom placed her purse on the table and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. We should eat something, she murmured. But when she opened the fridge, she sighed and closed it again. Neither of us had the appetite. I sat at the kitchen table while she made herself tea. She moved slowly like each step took thought. The prenup papers were still sitting on the counter, their presence loud in the silence. Mom, I said gently, how long have you known about her? She stared into her mug before answering. Too long, she whispered. Longer than I want to admit. I felt my chest tighten. Why didn't you leave? Her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from the memory. Because love doesn't disappear just because someone hurts you. And because I wanted our family to stay whole. I kept hoping he would come back to us. That he would remember who he was before the lies. She exhaled deeply. But today made it clear. He's not coming back. I didn't know what to say. I had always known things weren't perfect, but I didn't know the cracks were this deep. Mom took another sip of tea, then looked at the prenup again like it held answers she wasn't ready to face. What does the infidelity part say? I asked quietly. She ran her fingertips along the edge of the papers. It protects me, she said. And it protects you. More than your father realizes. Her voice stayed calm, but her words felt like the beginning of something bigger. Something that would change everything. Before she could say more, her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with Dad's name. Mom and I both froze. For a second she didn't move. She didn't reach for the phone, didn't ignore it, didn't do anything. She just stared at it like the name glowing on the screen was a ghost haunting her. The phone kept buzzing. Are you going to answer? I asked quietly. She hesitated, then shook her head. Not right now. She turned the phone face down, letting it ring out. He'll call again. And he did. 2 more times. Each time Mom ignored it. Eventually a message came through. She didn't open it. She didn't want to. Whatever Dad had to say could wait. As the evening settled in, Mom went to her room, leaving the prenup on the kitchen table. I sat in the living room, scrolling on my phone, trying to distract myself. But no matter how much I tried, the brunch kept replaying in my mind. The looks, the silence, the humiliation. Then something even stranger happened. My dad texted me. He never texted long messages. But this one was several lines. Apologies, excuses, explanations about miscommunication and misunderstanding. But none of it felt sincere. None of it erased what he did. What shocked me was the last line. Don't let your mother confuse you with legal stuff. You don't need to get involved. Legal stuff. That's what he called the prenup. That's how lightly he took the entire situation. I didn't reply. Later that night, I found Mom in her room sitting on the floor with an old box of documents. Not just the prenup, letters, financial papers, handwritten notes, things from years ago. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red but dry. I need to prepare, she said quietly. Your father is going to fight this. I sat beside her. What does he lose? She swallowed. More than he can afford to lose. Her voice was soft, but the meaning behind it was sharp. There was something huge in that prenup, something Dad had forgotten or underestimated, something he never expected to come back to haunt him. What exactly is in there? I asked again, my voice shaking with curiosity and fear. Mom pressed her lips together, then whispered, It's not just about money. She looked straight at me. It's about everything he built while married to me. And everything he tried to hide. The room felt colder suddenly. The hairs on my arms lifted. Mom, I whispered, what did he hide? She looked at the documents, her hand resting on the prenup. That, she said, is a story your father will try very hard to keep buried. She didn't tell me more. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. The Easter brunch was only a spark. The real fire was still coming. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing my father's face outside the restaurant, confused, frustrated, almost scared when Mom mentioned the prenup. It was the first time I'd ever seen him lose his confidence. He always walked through life like everything belonged to him. But when he looked at those papers, he looked cornered. By morning, the house felt even heavier. Mom was already awake, sitting at the dining table with the prenup spread out in front of her. She hadn't changed out of her clothes from the night before. Her hair was messy and the tea mug next to her was cold. Did you sleep at all? I asked quietly. She shook her head. There's too much to think about. I sat across from her. Is it really that serious? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tapped one part of the document with her finger. Your father didn't read his own prenup carefully, she murmured. Or he forgot. Or he thought I would never use it. She leaned back and sighed. But it protects everything tied to our marriage. Even things he tried to hide under other names. What do you mean? What things? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Your father has investments, businesses, properties, things with partners, friends, even his family. She paused again. He thinks they're separate from me, but they're not. They fall under marital assets. I felt my stomach tighten. So he could lose them? She nodded slowly. If he pushed me to court, yes. And if I ever proved infidelity publicly, the prenup gives me even more. The room fell silent again. I didn't want to take pleasure in his consequences, but part of me felt a strange sense of justice. After everything he did to us, maybe he was finally facing something he couldn't walk away from. Before I could ask more, Mom's phone started buzzing again. It was Dad, calling for the 5th time since yesterday. She sighed, let it ring out, then slowly picked up the phone and opened the newest message. She didn't show it to me, but her face tightened. What did he say? I asked. She handed me the phone wordlessly. The message was long. But one sentence jumped out immediately. We need to talk before you make things worse. Make things worse. Like she was the problem. Like she was the one who kicked us out of brunch. Like she was the one who broke vows and trust. Mom gently took the phone back. I'm not calling him yet, she said. He's not thinking clearly. And I'm not letting him twist this. I wanted to ask again what exactly he hid. What secret was buried deep enough to scare him? But every time I looked at the prenup papers, I could feel a storm approaching. Bigger than the brunch, bigger than the arguments, bigger than the affair. I stepped away to give her space and went upstairs to my room. But as soon as I sat on my bed, my phone buzzed. This time it was a message from someone I didn't expect. It was from my dad's sister, my Aunt Carla. She and Mom hadn't spoken much over the years. There was always tension, though I never understood why. Aunt Carla always treated me kindly, but she was always distant toward my mom. So when I saw her name flash across my screen, my heart dropped a little. Her message was short but strange. Can you call me? It's important. I hesitated for a few seconds, then dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. Sweetheart, are you with your mother? Yes, I said carefully. We're home. She exhaled shakily. I heard what happened yesterday. Of course she did. My father's family spread news faster than wildfire. They always did. Your father is panicking, she continued. He knows he messed up. But there's something else you should be aware of. My breath caught. What do you mean? Has your mother said anything? Anything about the paperwork? The prenup, I said. She has it. My aunt muttered something under her breath. Then she lowered her voice. Listen to me carefully. That prenup protects things your father hoped would never surface. If your mother pushes this, it won't just affect him. It'll affect the entire family. Everyone tied to him financially. My hand shook. What? What did he do? There was a long silence. Too long. Finally, Carla said, That's not my place to tell you. But don't assume your father's betrayal started with his affair. There are things he's been hiding for years. Things your mother may not even fully understand yet. Her words sent chills through me. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Because I don't want you caught in the middle when this blows up. Her voice cracked just slightly. And it will blow up. Before I could ask more, she said she had to go. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my reflection in the dark phone screen. I didn't know what scared me more, her warning or the shaky fear I heard in her voice. When I went downstairs, Mom was still at the table. I sat beside her, trying to find the right words. Mom, I said softly, why does Dad's family sound scared? She looked up slowly. Who called you? Aunt Carla. Mom lowered her gaze. I figured she'd reach out. She didn't look surprised. Not even a little. Mom, what exactly is Dad hiding? She tapped the papers again. Your father made certain business decisions while we were married. Decisions he should have told me about. But he didn't. And because he didn't, those decisions can hurt him now. I blinked. Are they illegal? No, she said quickly. Not illegal. Just messy. Complicated. And not as separate from our marriage as he hoped. As she spoke, I realized something important. Mom was calmer today. Not because she wasn't hurt, but because she finally understood the power she had. She wasn't chasing Dad. She wasn't begging. She wasn't trying to fix anything anymore. She was preparing. And somewhere deep down, I sensed she had been preparing for a long time. Later in the afternoon, while Mom went to take a shower, I walked into the kitchen to get water. That's when I heard it, knocking at the front door. Soft at first, then louder. I froze. We weren't expecting anyone. The knocking continued, steady and insistent. I walked to the door slowly, my heart racing. When I looked through the peephole, I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't Dad. It was his mistress, standing on our doorstep, holding her purse tightly, eyes red as if she had been crying. I didn't open the door. I barely breathed. She glanced around nervously, then leaned closer to the door like she knew I was there listening. Please, she whispered, voice trembling, I need to talk to you and your mother. It's important. He didn't tell you everything. The words sent fear rushing through me. Not because she was there, but because she sounded terrified. And if she was scared, then whatever Dad was hiding was much worse than any of us realized. The story wasn't even close to reaching its worst point. And now the mistress, his biggest secret, was standing at our door with another one. For a long moment I didn't move. I just stared through the peephole, trying to make sense of why she was here, on our doorstep, alone, looking nothing like the confident woman who stood next to my father at the Easter brunch. Her posture was small now, her eyes swollen, her hands shaking around the strap of her purse. It didn't feel right to open the door. Not after what happened. Not after the way she stood silently while my father dismissed us in front of everyone. But something in her expression, fear, desperation, maybe even guilt, made it impossible to walk away. I stepped back slowly and opened the door just a few inches, keeping my hand on the edge in case I needed to close it again. She blinked, surprised. I answered. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Please? I need to speak to your mother." "She's busy," I said quietly. It wasn't a lie. Mom was in the shower, trying to wash off the emotional mess of the last 2 days. "What do you want?" The woman looked around nervously, like she was afraid someone might see her standing there. "Can I come in? I won't stay long. No," I said firmly. "You can talk from here." She flinched, but she nodded. "Okay. I understand." She inhaled shakily. I didn't know he would treat you both that way. I didn't know he planned to embarrass you. I told him not to. I told him it was wrong." My stomach tightened. "But you still went along with it." She swallowed, her eyes dropping. "Yes. And I regret it." For a second I thought she might be lying. But the way her voice trembled felt too real to be fake. She wasn't the same woman who smiled confidently at brunch. The woman standing in front of me now looked like someone who had been crying all night. She looked up again, her expression desperate. "Your father is hiding things from me too," she said. "And I found out last night." My breath caught. "Hiding what?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I saw the messages." "What messages?" She looked over her shoulder again, almost paranoid. "He's been trying to move money. Quietly. Behind my back. Behind everyone's back. And when I confronted him, he said it had nothing to do with me." Mom chose that moment to appear behind me. Her hair was damp, her face tired. She froze when she saw who was at the door. "What is she doing here?" Mom asked, her voice firm. The mistress bowed her head slightly. "I came to talk. I came because you deserve to know what's going on." Mom stepped forward but didn't open the door wider. "Did he send you?" "No," she said quickly. "He doesn't know I'm here. If he did, he'd lose his mind." Mom's expression didn't soften, but she didn't close the door. "Say what you came to say." The woman nodded and wiped her eyes. "Your husband, he's in trouble. Financial trouble. And he's trying to hide it. From you. From me. From his family." Mom didn't react. Not even a blink. It was like she had expected this. The mistress continued. "There was a deal. A big one. Something he shouldn't have gotten involved in. And now he's trying to quietly move things before anyone notices." Mom crossed her arms. "I'm aware." The mistress looked stunned. You knew?" Mom looked her dead in the eye. "He underestimates how much I pay attention." For the first time since she arrived, the mistress stood speechless. She adjusted her purse strap again, her fingers trembling. "I thought he only lied to me," she whispered. "I didn't realize how deep it went." Mom didn't answer. Her silence spoke more than words could. Suddenly, the mistress reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Her hands shook as she held it out. "I found these papers in his office," she said softly. "They aren't copies. They're originals. I thought you should have them." Mom didn't move. She just stared at the envelope like it was a snake. I finally asked, "What's in it?" The mistress looked at me with sad eyes. "Proof. Proof of what he's been moving. Proof of what he's been hiding. Proof that he didn't think either of you would find." Mom reached out slowly, took the envelope and looked inside. Her face tightened, not in shock but in confirmation. "Why are you giving this to me?" Mom asked, her tone steady. The mistress wrapped her arms around herself, like she was holding her fear in. "Because I don't want to be part of this anymore. I don't want to be pulled into his mess. He lied to me too. I thought he loved me. But last night when I asked him about the money, he snapped. He lashed out. He acted like I was nothing." Her voice broke. "I realized he'll treat me the same way he treated you. And your daughter." The honesty in her voice, the shame, the regret, it felt too real to ignore. Mom exhaled slowly, her eyes softer but still guarded. "You should go home," she said gently. "This isn't a safe place for you to be right now. Not with what's happening." The mistress nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I know. I just wanted to tell you before things get worse." She turned to leave, but before stepping off the porch, she looked back at us. "He's more desperate than you think," she whispered. "And desperate people make dangerous decisions." When she left, Mom closed the door quietly. Not slamming it, not locking it, just closing it as if she needed a moment to breathe. She walked back to the dining table and opened the envelope fully. I followed her, feeling my pulse quicken. Inside were financial transfer forms, copies of accounts, property documents, notes scribbled in my father's handwriting. All of it pointing to one thing. He was trying to move his assets. Fast and secretly. "Mom," I whispered, is he trying to hide everything from you?" She didn't look up. "Not from me," she said. "From the prenup." I felt my stomach twist. "Is it allowed?" "No," she said quietly. "Not at all." She placed the papers next to the prenup. Seeing them side by side made everything suddenly real. My father's affair, his lies, his financial panic, his desperation. "Mom," I whispered, "what are you going to do?" She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly. "I'm going to wait," she said quietly. "And watch. Before he even realizes I know everything." She looked up at me with eyes that held both hurt and determination. "He thinks he still has control," she said. "But he doesn't." The tension in the room grew thicker. Because now the mistress knew the truth. Mom knew the truth. I knew the truth. But the only person who didn't know how much we knew was my father. And that meant everything was about to get even more dangerous. Way more dangerous than any of us were prepared for. Just when I thought everything was finally settling, life reminded me that peace doesn't stay untouched for long. About 2 months after our family started healing, something unexpected came in the mail. My mother found the envelope first. She was sorting through letters in the kitchen while I was on the couch scrolling through my phone. At first she didn't think much of it. But the moment she looked at the return address, her whole face changed. The color drained from her cheeks and she froze like her body forgot how to move. She slowly walked over to me and slipped the envelope onto the coffee table. I followed her eyes and felt my stomach tighten when I saw the sender. It was from a law office. Not my dad's attorney, not anyone we knew. A completely different firm. My mother didn't open it at first. She just stared at it, whispering, "Why now, after all this time?" Something in her voice made me sit up straight. I could tell this wasn't a small matter. It wasn't junk mail or a mistake. It felt heavy, intentional, like someone somewhere pulled a string right as we finally started getting our lives back on track. She finally opened the envelope with shaky hands. Inside was a formal letter stating that someone, whose name wasn't mentioned yet, had made a legal inquiry involving my mother, the prenup, and her past financial records. I didn't understand everything, but it sounded serious enough to send a chill through the room. The letter said more details would be discussed in an upcoming meeting they requested. They even set a date. I kept asking her what it meant, but she just looked lost. Not scared the way she used to be. More confused, like she couldn't figure out who would dig up something after so many years. My mind instantly went to my dad's mistress, wondering if she had somehow resurfaced. But the tone of the letter didn't feel personal. It felt calculated. That night my mom barely slept. I heard her walking around the hallway, breathing deeply like she was fighting with memories she thought she had buried. By the next morning she finally opened up. She said the prenup wasn't just about protecting assets. There were other agreements tucked into it that she never told anyone, not even us. Agreements that she'd hoped would never see the light again. She told me there were people involved in her past, business-related, who didn't like how my father had protected her legally. She said that back then some of them felt she walked away with more than she deserved, even though she really didn't. But because of the prenup, they couldn't challenge her. At the time she had brushed it off and focused on raising us. She thought they had moved on with their lives. But now it looked like someone hadn't. My brother came over later that day, and the moment he saw the letter on the table, his expression darkened. He asked if we thought our dad might be behind it, but my mother shook her head. She said this wasn't his style. He might have made selfish choices before, but he wasn't vindictive. This was coming from someone else. Someone who knew enough about the prenup to cause trouble but wasn't directly tied to our family anymore. That only made things worse. If we didn't know who was behind it, we couldn't predict what they wanted. For the next few days the atmosphere in the house shifted again. Not with anger or betrayal this time, but with unease. The kind where you feel like the ground is shaking under your feet even though everything looks normal on the surface. My mom tried to keep up her daily routine, but I caught her spacing out more than once. My brother called constantly, more protective than before, and even my dad unexpectedly reached out after hearing that someone had contacted her. He sounded worried. Not about himself, about her. Which only made the entire situation stranger. If it wasn't him and it wasn't anyone from her current life, who would go through the trouble of digging into a decades-old prenup? A few nights later we finally got our second plot twist. I was helping my mom clean up after dinner when she remembered something. a name she hadn't spoken in years. She said that back then, before she married my dad, she had a business partner who tried convincing her not to sign a prenup at all. That partner believed my father owed her more financially because she had helped him during the early years of his career. But my mom disagreed and felt the prenup was fair. They had a falling out, and the partner ended up leaving their small business arrangement. It was the first time I ever heard this story. She said that partner had always held resentment toward both her and my dad. But the strange part was that she moved abroad years ago and had supposedly cut off all ties. At least that's what my mom believed. The more she talked, the clearer it became that this partner had motive, old grudges, old money disagreements, unresolved bitterness. But why now? Why resurrect a fight after so long? We were still discussing it when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something about the timing made me open it. It was a single sentence. I told her the past would catch up. My hands went cold. I showed it to my mother immediately, and her face went pale. She recognized the style of the message. She whispered the partner's name under her breath, and suddenly everything clicked together in a way that made my heart race. This wasn't over. Someone out there wasn't just reopening old wounds, they were planning something bigger. Something that involved our entire family. The meeting mentioned in the letter was only days away, and for the first time since the original drama began, I felt the stakes rise sharply again. This wasn't about brunch drama or personal betrayal anymore. This was turning into something deeper, something connected to the past that none of us had fully understood. And just when we thought we had finally moved forward, someone was pulling us right back into a storm we didn't see coming. The moment the door slammed behind me, the house fell into a strange silence. It wasn't peaceful or comforting. It felt like everything was pausing, holding its breath, waiting for the truth to finally drag itself into the light. I could still hear my heartbeat echoing from the argument earlier, the words my mother threw at me circling in my mind like they had been rehearsed for years. But now, standing alone in the hallway, I felt something shift inside me. I was finally done running from all of it. I needed answers, and this time I wasn't backing down. When I walked into the living room, my brother was already there, acting like he hadn't been listening from the stairs the whole time. He tried to pretend he was still focused on his phone, but his eyes darted toward me too quickly. The tension between us felt sharp, like a wire stretched too tight. He knew things he'd kept quiet about for far too long, and I wasn't letting him slip away this time. I asked him directly what he'd been hiding. He looked up, surprised at how calm I sounded. Instead of denying anything, he just sighed. That alone told me enough. He admitted he'd known for months that my mother had been taking things from me, decisions, opportunities, support, and redirecting them toward him. At first he said he didn't want any part of it. But then he admitted that, over time, he got used to the benefits, the attention, the way she put him first. His voice cracked when he said it, as if saying it out loud made him hear how unfair it sounded. I didn't yell. I didn't even speak for a moment. I just let the weight of it sink deeper. Betrayal is strange like that, quiet at first, then louder the more you understand it. He apologized, but apologies felt too small compared to everything I had lost. Still, I could tell he wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was scared. And part of me wondered what he was scared of, losing me or losing whatever power our mother had given him. Before I could ask more, we heard the front door open again. My mother walked in slowly, like she expected the entire house to collapse under her steps. For once, she didn't have that confident expression she always used when she wanted things to go her way. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally drained, like something in her had finally snapped too. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there looking at both of us, her eyes moving back and forth as if the silence between us was louder than any conversation. Finally, she said she had something to tell us, something she'd been avoiding for years. The room felt heavier, like the air thickened enough to choke. Even my brother straightened up, bracing himself. She told us that everything she'd done, the controlling, the favoritism, the lies, came from a place she couldn't admit before. Fear. Not fear of losing us, but fear of losing the image she built for herself. She wanted a perfect family, one she could show off, one she could feel proud of. And somehow, somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that pushing me aside made life easier. She said she felt safer giving everything to my brother because she didn't think I needed her. She thought I was strong enough to figure life out alone. Hearing her say that felt more painful than anything else. It wasn't just neglect, it was a misunderstanding that twisted the family apart. But the twist came when she told us something neither of us expected. She revealed that she hadn't been acting on her own the whole time. Someone else had been pushing her, influencing her decisions, feeding her doubts, and it wasn't anyone inside the family. It was someone she had trusted years ago, someone who claimed to advise her on parenting when she was struggling. Someone who made her believe that treating her children differently would prevent us from competing with each other. She finally confessed that this person had recently contacted her again, threatening to expose personal secrets about her if she didn't keep following those old patterns. That revelation hit me like cold water. All this time I thought she was the sole cause of everything. But now there was someone else in the shadows. Someone who had planted these ideas and let our family tear itself apart. It didn't excuse her choices, but it brought a new layer to everything, a twist that made the situation far more complicated than I ever imagined. Before I could process it, the house suddenly felt like it wasn't just the three of us. There was a presence, a memory of someone we didn't yet know but would soon have to face. My brother stood up, confused but angry. He demanded the name of this person, but my mother hesitated, almost shaking. She said she didn't want to bring them back into our lives. She didn't want to reopen that door. But I told her the door was already open. We just didn't know what waited behind it. The tension grew thicker. The conflict between us hadn't ended, it had evolved. Now we weren't just dealing with old wounds, we were up against something larger, something that had shaped our family from the shadows. And even though the truth finally started pouring out, I could tell this wasn't the end. This was the moment everything broke open. As the night deepened, the three of us sat there, wounded but finally honest. We weren't healed. We weren't okay. But for the first time the lies were gone. And still, in the back of my mind, one question burned like a spark waiting to become a fire. Who was the person who manipulated my mother, and why were they suddenly trying to return? After that long night of confessions, the house didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't heavy with tension anymore, but it wasn't peaceful either. It felt like a place that had finally admitted its truth, like the walls themselves were relieved to stop holding secrets. When I woke up the next morning I felt strangely calm. Not healed, not fixed, just calm. And I knew that the rest of the story wasn't about digging further into pain. It was about choosing what came next. My mother was already in the kitchen when I walked downstairs. Her eyes looked softer than usual, almost unsure, like she didn't know how to act now that the truth was out. She offered me tea, something she rarely took the time to do, and her voice trembled when she said she wanted to finish the conversation we started. I could tell she didn't want to avoid anything anymore. She told me everything about the person who had influenced her years ago. It wasn't some mysterious stranger with dark intentions the way it sounded the night before. It was an old family friend, someone she used to trust deeply at a time when she felt lost as a parent. She admitted she had been insecure, overwhelmed, and scared of failing. That person had made her believe that dividing her children emotionally would prevent jealousy and competition. It was terrible advice, but she had followed it because she didn't know better and didn't have anyone else guiding her. They resurfaced recently only to take advantage of her guilt, and she had felt trapped. Knowing that didn't erase the pain, but it gave me context. It made her mistakes feel more human, more complicated, less like pure betrayal and more like fear that spiraled out of control. I didn't forgive everything instantly, but I understood her in a way I never had before. Sometimes parents make poor choices not because they don't love their children, but because they don't love themselves enough to trust their own decisions. My brother joined us at the table, and for a moment, we all sat there quietly. He looked more nervous than anyone. The way he apologized again wasn't dramatic. It was simple and real. He admitted he could have spoken up earlier, and I could see he regretted staying silent for so long. The strange thing was that I didn't feel angry at him anymore. The night before had drained every ounce of anger out of me. What remained was a bittersweet understanding that we were all hurting in different ways but never said it loudly enough for anyone to hear. We spent the entire morning talking about everything, how we grew up, how we misunderstood each other, how favoritism shaped us without us realizing it. It was messy, emotional, and uncomfortable at times, but it was honest. And honesty was something this family had avoided for years. By the afternoon, we decided to deal with the last unfinished piece of the puzzle. My mother blocked the person who had been manipulating her. She said she didn't owe them any explanation or apology. She was done letting someone else control the narrative of her family. Watching her do that felt like watching a chapter close, not just for her but for all of us. It felt like she was finally choosing us. Not the idea of a perfect family, but the real family standing right in front of her. In the days that followed, the energy in the house changed. It wasn't magically healed, but it felt lighter. My mother tried to rebuild the small things first. Cooking dinner together, asking about our day, apologizing when she caught herself slipping back into old habits. My brother tried too, making an effort to connect with me in ways he never had before. And I worked on letting myself feel things without shutting down. Healing wasn't a straight line, but at least we were walking in the same direction now. One evening about a week later we all sat outside in the backyard. The weather felt peaceful, warm with a soft breeze. My mother looked at us with a quiet smile and said she knew rebuilding trust would take time, but she hoped we would give her the chance to prove she had changed. I looked at her and saw sincerity, something I rarely saw before. I told her I wasn't promising perfection from my side either, but I was willing to try. That felt like the most human thing any of us could say. What surprised me was how my brother opened up too. He admitted he always felt pressure to be the one she approved of, even when he didn't want the role. He said he finally understood that being favored wasn't a gift, it was a burden. He wanted to earn relationships in the right way, not through imbalance or guilt. Hearing him say that made me realize how much this situation had shaped him too. As the night went on, we shared stories from our childhood. The funny moments, the awkward ones, even the moments when we misunderstood each other. It was like we were learning our family all over again, but this time with open eyes. Over the next few weeks, we talked more, healed more, and slowly rebuilt our connection. Things didn't return to how they used to be, they became better, more honest, more real. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything or hide my hurt. I felt seen. Months later, when I looked back at everything that happened, I realized the real twist wasn't the revelation of who influenced my mother. The twist was how a family that almost fell apart managed to create something stronger from the ruins. Pain had pushed us apart, but truth brought us back together. The final takeaway for me was simple but powerful. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing what matters more, holding on to resentment or making space for something healthier. And sometimes the people who hurt us aren't villains. They're flawed humans dealing with fears we never saw.